Chapter 9. Savior. Belgian chocolate. Smooth sailing. The girl's heart chased after her scream. Water came rushing into her mouth and eyes as the vessel cleaved its way towards her, single-mindedly bent on tearing her down. Despite being keen on breathing and on not feeling pain, the girl found that she was immobile from the waist up. Her legs kicked to keep her afloat, but her arms, chest, heart, and mind were suddenly and inexplicably frozen. It was senseless to fight. The flying vessel was too fast, large, and overwhelming. Losing was inevitable. Then one thought flowed through her mind, gliding slowly, dispassionately by. I am going to die. Taking a deep breath, she stopped kicking and let her exhausted body sink as the vessel kept approaching. When her eyes were halfway into the water, she started to feel herself rising up out of the waves. Then she was being moved forward at a rapid pace. Her slow, almost shut down mind started to register that there was someone holding her, helping her move forward. She was facing upwards, her heart pulsing hard, as if it could reach up and touch the beauty of the sky. Water and air rushed down from her shoulders, ran down her body and off her toes. Far too soon, her savior laid her down on the sand, which was still cold from the night, but warming fast. Her eyes fell shut and her mouth naturally fell into a smile. Feeling the weight of a presence standing near, she opened her eyes and pushed herself up, her swollen and water-wrinkled hands aching and pulling in protest. The sun couldn't have dazzled her eyes more than the beautiful creature within arm's length of her. It was a he. The rising sun was glinting off the water on his perfectly formed body. His deportment wasn't cocky. Confident doesn't fully cover it either. Maybe it was just comfortable, grounded. His eyes, the brief look she got out of them anyway before she hastily looked away in embarrassment, were something beyond this world, even beyond his beautiful body. They were smiling, though in an amused sort of way. It looked as if he kept delicious secrets safely stored behind those eyes, and they were asking her if she could keep them. Recognition slowly set in. It was him, the man she had seen leaning against the tree from her time with the land dwellers, the one she regretted leaving behind. After I met you in that math class we had together, you disappeared, but only for a time. Fate is a funny beast, and it hadn't forgotten about us. We ended up having the same science class a year later. And, thankfully, this time I sat at the back of the room and could safely admire you from afar. After that year ended, you disappeared again, only to reappear a few years later when I accidentally discovered where you worked. I didn't recognize you at first, and I hope that didn't offend. I'm just hopelessly shy and cowardly, so when I walked into that restaurant to give my sister a promised meal, I saw a young man, and instantly my head weighed 1,000 pounds and fell towards my chest. I barely looked at you. I just saw a beautiful man, and that was enough for me. I clocked out, but was still super alert that you were there, that you were looking at me, or at least in my general direction. As I was about to pay, you asked me if I remembered you. Since you asked me a direct question, I forced my head up out of a sense of politeness. I didn't fully recognize you at first. I kind of awkwardly stared at you for a bit, and just before it actually could get awkward, you solved the mystery for me and reminded me which 2 classes we had been in together. Right when you said that, it all came back to me, and I said the usual niceties. It was only after I left that I finally remembered your name. And no, I didn't see your name tag. I failed to find it when I looked at you before, though my sister confirmed that I was correct when I brought it up. She wasn't blinded by your beauty like me, so she was able to find the name tag hidden in plain sight that I had missed. Obsession rekindled, and rekindled hard. How could someone remember me from so long ago? Remember the exact classes that we had been in together when we didn't even know each other? It's gotta be love, man. Or at least interest. But maybe you just have a good memory. Either way, I fell for you again. And I had a perfectly plausible way to stalk you without being too ridiculously obvious about it, which was to go where you were to get something to eat. The second time that I saw you there, my brother was with me, and this encounter with you was encouraging to me, though I don't think you experienced it quite that way yourself. You had seen me with him and was about to take our order. You were all smiles for me, but you were pretty ice cold to him. My brother then decided to make it clear that he and I are siblings, as he knew that I liked you, and he also knew that almost everyone thinks that we are not related, since we don't look alike. And people tend to automatically assume that a boy and a girl who are similar in age and who are out in public together are dating. That, in all likelihood, was what you were thinking, as many have before you, and possibly many will after you. We certainly don't look alike in most ways, so I guess it makes sense that no one realizes that we are siblings. But that common misunderstanding can be very annoying nevertheless, and, as in this case, it can be incredibly inconvenient. Consequently, to make it very clear that we are related, my brother turned to me and loudly addressed me as sister. After he cleared up that confusion, the ice melted, and you immediately acted friendly towards him from then on. I took it as a sign that you were interested in me in more than an acquaintance type of way, and I dared to hope that you might actually like me. After that, I was soaring high. Whenever I went to your work, which was usually at night, I would pretty much always sit at the same table facing the window. It helped me feel more comfortable, since I don't particularly like being looked at by other people, and I was able to stare at the sky, which was always nice. The window was also a convenient way to watch you, as you had a habit of sitting on the sidewalk, staring straight ahead into the darkness. I don't know if you knew about my watching you out there, but I felt closer to you when you were there, even with the glass between us. You always showed me more of your character when you were alone with the darkness than when you were inside with the artificial light. One night in particular stands out from the rest. You were sitting at your favorite spot, out on the curb, but unlike me, who simply stares straight ahead or at the ground and tries really hard to ignore a world that she is hypersensitively aware of, you seem to have no problem being aware of the here and now and of your immediate surroundings. There was no shame in it, nor did there seem to be an ego behind it. You simply looked and observed, seemingly without judgment, and in most cases, without haste. One night, you noticed that a carriage was left outside the store next to your work. I immediately judged it to have been left by someone too lazy to walk the 2 seconds it took to put it inside. But you immediately stood up, walked over to the carriage, quietly put it back where it belonged, and resumed your spot on that curb, looking out into the darkness again. This memory never ceases to fill me with tenderness for you. You made me want to strive to be better than I am. Your habits helped me to shape some sort of personality for you too. For instance, when you would sit down on the curb and stare off into the distance, straight ahead, point blank and unafraid, your legs would be bent and apart with your arms resting on each leg in a comfortable man stance, and you looked deep in thought. Most nights you seemed very contented, happily thinking about whatever your mind happened to venture to. You seemed like you had a deep, rich inner life that I wanted you to either openly share with me someday, or we could just sit contentedly side by side and understand each other's inner worlds through the process of osmosis. Sometimes you look like you were working out solutions in your head to something, or maybe strategizing your next move. Other times you would look dejected or like you weren't at peace. And God, how I wanted to touch you and make whatever problem was bothering you disappear, to clearly display the solution across my white chest in the morning for you to solve. No worries in the world. Some of these moments may seem small, maybe even insignificant, but they weren't to me. They revealed to me a little bit of the mystery that is you, bit by bit. The mystery I was too afraid to learn by actually getting to know you face to face. But I only watched you this closely when your back was turned, or you weren't looking at me directly. As I'm sure you know already, when you were fully paying attention to me, I would seemingly ignore you much of the time. Even back then, I knew how much of a jerk I was being. Some days, I wanted to be cruel. It made me feel like I had some sort of power over you. Other days, I was just too cowardly and shy to even look at you. Looking back, I can imagine how confused and jaded you must have been at receiving the mixed signals I was inadvertently sending. But at the time, I felt somewhat justified. I was enamored by the idea that if we were soulmates, You would understand me on a deeper level than anyone else and would naturally know when I'm flirting or remotely interested in you. Obviously, I completely ignored the fact that we need to actually establish some sort of relationship first so that we can really get to know each other. Not to mention, I figured that you were the man, and as a result, you should be the one to initiate flirtation step number 2, aka asking me out, based on my super subtle, barely detectable flirtation signals. And I felt, at this stage in the game, that we had already established an understanding of liking each other. I also had ridiculous expectations that everything would happen at once. Boom, pow, wham. We would immediately start dating and go on to be awesome together. However, that, as you and I both know oh too well, didn't happen. I can be quite unreasonable sometimes, as everyone can from time to time, I suppose, and being unreasonable to you was not beyond me either. I expected too much of you, but I still blamed you for not understanding what I thought should have happened. You should have known that I was shy, that it was your job to walk up to me all suave and sexy and ask me out, and all would unfurl beautifully after that. That's how it was supposed to happen, at least according to my head. I guess in a weird way, I felt that I had done my duty. I could just lay back and let you take care of the rest. I did what I do best: wait, remain passive, and wonder why nothing ever gets better. You not actively pursuing me made me occasionally doubt myself. Maybe you didn't like me after all. And that insecurity made me even more cruel. And on top of that, I got foolhardy and, paradoxically, overly confident. Essentially, every time I visited you, the floor suddenly became very interesting, and lifting my head on my stiffened neck was a workout I was not willing to attempt. This probably sounds stupid, but I felt embarrassed looking at someone as beautiful as you. My defense has typically always been flight. I couldn't look at you, so I looked somewhere else. I avoided the situation, which is a typical me response to anything remotely uncomfortable, confusing, or embarrassing. That part you might have been used to, but I don't think you were. You seemed hurt that I wouldn't look at you. I would even act bolder to others while avoiding looking at or engaging with you at all costs. As if I didn't hurt you enough, let me give you some examples to re-stab the wound open to allow the memory's free access to flow through. Do you remember when someone I knew walked in? I didn't even so much as look at you. I don't even think I said hi, but I made a big deal out of this chick for no reason at all. That was me being a dick, and that hurts me to this day. You see, when I am hurt, I act like a wounded animal and attack on instinct, and I am not above dying in the fight for my bride. Maybe it's my super scorpionic powers or something, but really it's probably just me being passive, indirect, not taking control of my own reactions. Me blindly following my feelings instead of thinking and rationalizing them out first. I could have made it clear how I felt. I could have straight up said what I thought. I could have, but the bottom line is I didn't, and I resented it. It ultimately boiled down to the fact that I wanted you, the man, to save me, because I felt powerless to do it myself. And I'm sorry for every time I seemingly ignored you, for every time I didn't say hi or start or keep the conversation going. I'm sorry that I barely looked at you, although I was definitely well acquainted with your back and the back of your head for a while there. And I'm sorry I didn't make us an us when I had many chances to do so. I'm sorry. But that's why I'm speaking now in the most powerful form words can take. Permanent, long-lasting, real and raw and true. This is why I have to find you, to redeem myself, to fix my own mistakes. That's pretty selfish, I suppose, depending on how you look at this, but I have to try again, to actually get to know you, not just admire your sexiness from a distance. I have to do it right this time, with actions instead of mental fantasies. There is a common saying that distance makes the heart grow fonder. However, I've found that is not always the case. Sometimes people let things go when those things disappear. They may look back with fondness, but they ultimately move on, particularly if they have found something they consider to be better, possibly because it is in the here and now and not buried in the past. I tend not to let things go easily. I had an attachment to my first crush for years. The same goes for almost all crushes I have had in the past. Don't feel discouraged, my man God. You are different. Your memory makes my body go hot and cold. You make me excited and heartsick all at once. You are different. Because you were the first man to give me the experience of a broken heart. It went like this. You would enter the restaurant on your day off to chat with your coworkers, but you weren't alone this time. You had a woman with you. Now, I know that I shouldn't assume. It could have been your cousin or a friend or your sister, but to me, she was someone more. You honestly didn't look that pleased with her, but you were still there with her. There was a moment when I passed by her, when I was either going towards or away from the bathroom, and she must have sensed a threat because she looked at me with hate, as if she wished she was Medusa herself and could dry up my blood and watch me die just through the power of her eyes. I was angry, vaguely threatened, but kind of content and a bit amused, since I didn't think I physically was the type of girl who could be considered a threat by anybody. I barely looked at her too, but her presence upset me. As I went back to my usual table, I felt my heart ache, and then literally snap in two. After you two left, I was amazed at myself. I never knew that that expression, brokenhearted, was actually how it really felt. It physically felt like my heart broke. I was oddly fascinated by this revelation, and it gave me even more hope that my suspicions that you were meant for me is correct. No one had ever made me feel that way before.